Joining us in the flesh for the World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsonya, but Rufai does a better job of your intro though. Okay. Good, yeah?
Good. All right. Yeah, Femi, go ahead.
Morning. Good morning to you. Rufai. Morning, Ayo. Good morning, Bibai. I know we've got a very, very condensed show today, so I'm going to give you a light world brief. Let's begin with third country deportations. Now, a Cuban man who was deported by the United States to the African nation of Eswatini is on hunger strike at a maximum security prison after being held for 3 months without charge. His name is Roberto Mosquera de Parral, and he was one of the 5 men sent to the small kingdom in southern Africa back in the middle of July as part of the United States deportation program to Africa. Now, his US-based lawyers say that he has been held for over 3 months without charge or access to legal representation. But Eswatini says that the protest is actually not what it seems. They say it's religious fasting, but he says that that claim is not true. They're calling it a mischaracterization of what is actually happening in that facility there. Now, civic groups within Eswatini have also taken authorities to court to challenge the holding of foreign nationals in prison without a charge. Eswatini says that the men would be repatriated. In fact, I believe a Jamaican man who was among that group has actually already been repatriated back to Jamaica. So they are saying that, yes, these men would be repatriated, but they could be held within the Kingdom of Eswatini for up to a year. And there could be more claims on the way as US authorities say that they want to deport Kilma Abrego Garcia to Eswatini under the same program. Now, let's move over into politics, South American politics. And the Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has announced that he will seek a historic 4th term in next year's presidential election. Now, Lula is already 80 years old. He's nearly 80 years old. But even at that age, he remains by far the most influential figure on the Brazilian left. And it's been that case for 40 years. Now, if he is elected, he would be 85 by the time he finishes his 4th term and would have become the only democratically elected Brazilian president to have spent 16 years in power. This, of course, does remind me of African leaders here on the African continent wanting to return or stay in political power even in their elder years. Now, Paul Biya comes into mind, being that he is the oldest president in the world at 92 years old, and he is still hoping to still be in power as he would be, 97 if he is re-elected. We'll find out what happens next week in Cameroon. But it does beg the question whether or not longevity equates to strength and political quality. We'll see. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts about that. But before then, there's still another story on sports out of the United States that I want to tell you about. Well, FBI agents have arrested prominent NBA figures, including Portland Trail Blazers head coach Chauncey Billups and the guard Terry Rozier, who plays for the Miami Heat, in a sweeping indictment alleging an illegal gambling ring with Mafia ties. Now, the charges accuse these insiders of using non-public injury and lineup information, rigged poker tables, and concealed technology to defraud bettors. Now, coming home to Nigeria, now the sports betting industry is also growing here and can be vulnerable to similar cases of fraud. Now, Nigerians between the ages of 18 to 40 years old may spend up to 1.8 billion naira daily on sports betting, showing the scale of this industry and its potential societal impact. Now, our special correspondent, Abi Owolawi, did release a report on sports betting a few months ago. It might have even been last year, in which she mentioned the fact that regulatory oversight remains weak in this industry and consumers are unprotected, and there are disputes between regulators over who actually governs the sector. So very interesting conversations there. Before I come over to my wonderful colleagues, let's take a look at our papers today. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. And This Day does lead with a huge array of stories. So firstly, you've got President Tinubu swearing in the new INEC chairman, Professor Amupitan, and charging him to serve with integrity ahead of these Anambra governorship elections next month. It also reports that the NNPP leader, Rabiu Kwankwaso, says that the 2027 polls will be tough, and he says that he's open to alliances with any political party. So we'll see what happens there. And then also in another story, just to the top there, we do see that the UK Supreme Court has trashed PNID's case against Nigeria and insists the firm must pay this £44 million legal cost in pound sterling. So keep our eyes ready for that. Let's move on to another paper this morning. The New Telegraph, if you take a look at that, it does lead also with President Tinubu describing the forthcoming Anambra elections as a litmus test for Nigeria's new INEC chairman. So he's got to get straight to work there. Moving on to the Daily Independent, it does lead with and report that the Federal High Court in Abuja has directed INEC to prosecute the Minister of State for Labour and Employment, his name is Nkeruka Onyediocha, for allegedly forging election documents. It's that story just here to the top of the paper there. Very interesting read. Let's take a look at the Punch this morning. We are skating through these papers. The Punch does report that the federal government has begun a nationwide operation which is targeting syndicates behind oil and gold smuggling in order to curb economic sabotage. And then lastly, we will take one UK paper. I know we're short on time today. If we take a look at the UK Telegraph, it does report that King Charles did go over to the Vatican. He is an Anglican himself, and he is the head of the Church of England, but he did join Pope Francis, the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, in a rare joint prayer at the Vatican. Now, according to the report, the historic moment marked the first such act of worship between an English monarch and a pope in nearly 500 years. This symbolizes this bridge between Christian denominations and reinforcing the King's commitment to religious unity and global peace in the United Kingdom and beyond. That is your World Brief, and those are your papers.
And that's very apt, because if you know the many years of battle between the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church, medieval times and all of that, you will know that's really very symbolic, and that's been on for a while. As regards Lula, yes, Lula wants to stay on, but the difference between Lula and African leaders, they impoverish people, but Lula single-handedly brought over 20 million people out of poverty with Bossa Familia. But why he might be seeking re-election? Because he's been fighting with the right. He's one of been the most phenomenal figure on the left in Brazil. He's been to court. In fact, he's been to jail at some point recently as regards the Lava Jato, the car wash scandal, and Odebrecht and things like that. And he thinks probably if he doesn't consolidate and he leaves, but by the time he leaves power, if he doesn't consolidate effectively, all of his political detractors might still come up against him. You know what they did with the judges against him when the former president was still there, and they barred him from campaigning the election. So, as unlike Paul Biya, Lula, has been doing a lot of great work as regards that. All right. Again, next question. So we have
just very quickly, like we said, today we're tumbling through the show this morning. But going to Roberto, the Cuban deportee, these amplify some of the criticisms of this Trump deportee plan. Especially, you talked about him not being charged in Eswatini, formerly called Swaziland. And the reason for that is because he has not committed a crime in Eswatini. The crime he was charged for was committed in the United States of America. His lawyers say alleged murder. The United States says murder. But whatever nomenclature it is, the thing is, he's said to have served his time in the United States. So being deported to Eswatini, the question then is, why is he being held? Why is he still being in prison? Either a decision is made like his counterparts from, Jamaica, who has been sent back to his country. And that's why he has embarked on this on hunger strike. I think it's unfair for the government to try to paint it by saying, oh, he's fasting, when his lawyer has been adamant to say it is as a result of the unfair treatment, which, again, we begin to unravel the legal ramifications of this. Can a man serve a sentence in a country that he did not commit a crime without being charged or not? So there's still a lot of areas that need to be fine-tuned in this Trump's deportee plan. It's not working at the moment, but he still insists on going forward.
Thank you, Ayo.
Right, yeah, I mean, still speaking on deportees, prisoners and so forth, interesting to see how the narrative has shifted from Abrego Garcia, that's the El Salvador citizen, from him going to Cuban, excuse me. No, Abrego Garcia is from El Salvador,
the
yes.
actual person in Swatini. Go ahead,
yes.
you were correct.
Because that conversation has shifted from him. Remember, initially he was supposed to be sent to Uganda.
Yes.
And there was an uproar, and Uganda stood up against that, and they said, we're not having it. Uganda is also coming up to an election. So I think they thought this is too controversial for us during an election cycle. And now the narrative has shifted to him also going to Eswatini. And we know that Eswatini has welcomed these prisoners for a cash cash transaction with open arms, but we knew that the legal nitty-gritty was always going to come down to this. Let's see how it goes. I certainly do hope that he doesn't eventually, succumb to this hunger strike. And just in closing, as I go, Brazil's presidential term limits are very interesting to me. So you're allowed to serve 2 consecutive terms and then step out for a term and then come back and serve 2 more consecutive terms, which I think is quite interesting because I feel if you can serve 2 consecutive terms, step out and still win, and to serve another couple of terms, then you deserve to be there. At the age of 80, well, let's look at competence, because we've got a young president in Senegal, Diomaye Faye, who came with so much goodwill, but there's a lot of disappointment around how he's performed. So I'm not sure if age is really, but I know also Lula da Silva had some brain surgery as well, which is some of the concerns. But my time is up. Adefemi Akinsanya, thank you so much for taking us through this.
No worries.